Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the English department. I'm Chris Ratcliffe, chair of the department, and I'm delighted to welcome all of the award winners, all of the families and friends of the award winners, all of the faculty who've come today to celebrate all the different accomplishments. So we've got a couple speakers, but before I introduce them, I would like you to join me in thanking the people who planned this. Kristen and Jacqueline and Ashley and Bruce, we wouldn't be here without you, so thank you very much. Our first speaker today is Neal Lester. I'm delighted to be able to call him a colleague and also to introduce him to you today because I'm sure you're going to have a wonderful time listening to his comments. He's a foundation professor here at ASU in the English department. He's also the founder of the award-winning project Humanities. He has received his degree from Vanderbilt University, and I believe you were the first African-American student to get an English degree from Vanderbilt, a PhD from Vanderbilt. Yeah. He's a frequent public speaker, media commentator, op-ed contributor, and discussion facilitator. He's also the author or editor of 7 different books. So the bottom line is Neal Lester has street cred in the academy and in the public realm. So without further ado, Neal.
Thank you, Bruce. Congratulations, graduate. Where are the graduates today? Well, higher. We need to see you. Yeah. And then the families and friends of the graduates, where are you? Families and friends of the graduates, all right? Where are the teachers and the mentors and the other supporters of these graduates? Where are you? Okay, all right. Well, is this a moment that makes you happy? How happy are you? Okay, all right, that's really happy, all right? Yeah, oh, thank you. Well, I want you to do something to show me just how happy you are, okay? Because you just said you were ecstatic. You said you were ecstatic. You said you were very happy. Well, is that a rhetorical question? Okay, all right. Well, I want that if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, then you really ought to show it. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, then you really ought to show it. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. Now, if you're happy and you know it, shout hooray! If you're happy and you know it, shout hooray! If you're happy and you know it, then you really ought to show it. If you're happy and you know it, shout hooray! If you're happy and you know it, do all 3. Hooray! 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 If you're happy and you know it, then you really ought to show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Observation number 1. Everyday lessons in ableism are everywhere. Everywhere. You don't have to go look for them. Observation number 2. Happiness can be quite performative. I don't know if you are happy. I don't know if some of you played along with me to make me happy. Some of you probably thought, what on earth is he doing? I don't want to do that, and that's not making me happy because it's silly, all right? But graduates, what I want to say to you is being happy is a pretty tall order. Remember Bobby McFerrin, old folks in the room, who told us in 1988, don't worry, be happy. And then that 2006 Penguin movie showed us what it looks like when you can't sing, but you have happy feet. Older people in the room. And I have somebody has called these happy socks. And then it's not quite happy socks, but here's some that are hoppy socks, okay? And then I picked up this from, an ASU stand, and it says you can bank on happy. Not quite sure what that means. But when I say it's a tall order, I mean, we can't just be happy, but the messages out there in the world tell us that you have to be so happy that when others look at you, they become happy. Now, that's a pretty lot of happiness, is it not? Well, I want to sort of talk about this notion of happy, because it's okay to be happy, but I want graduates here that if you are happy and you know it, I want you to breathe in this moment. Nearly and neatly pack it into a little box of excitement that you feel that you can sort of bring out in the next moment after this reception, tonight, tomorrow, and the coming weeks. What this moment right now says to me, 2003 graduates, is not so much that you are happy, but that you have mostly colored within those lines, that you have mostly disciplined or been disciplined enough to get those assignments done, mostly on time, and that you have mostly preferred to go to class in person than to use that hybrid Zoom option. Whatever you've done, you've mostly done it right to get you here. But doing all of what it takes to get here probably didn't make you happy. What you have done individually and collectively with those in your corners, your support systems, your support teams, certainly deserves a hand clapping, a foot stomping, and a hooray, if you're able to do that. With the families, friends, and supporters of the 2023 graduates, please identify yourselves so that we can acknowledge and thank you. Okay, notice I said identify yourselves, not about stomping and clapping, because those lessons are everywhere. While you savor the memories of this day and this moment, what comes after this reception, this day, and this personal milestone for you is in fact a future that, here's the cliche, holds both challenge and opportunity. What comes after this moment will test the very foundations laid in this department, in this college, by your courses, by your advisors, by these staff, by these faculty, colleagues, and mentors, all who love and support you and care about you, know that you're up to the challenges and will make those opportunities potentially opportunities that impact people beyond you. With so much happening in the world today that rocks the very foundations of who we are and what we believe in, graduates know that your happiness is not enough to sustain you or anyone else who is important to you. Know that so many are depending on you to set aside your happiness for a greater good. It is possible that you, as I, have learned that over the many years of being in the academy, that happiness can come in an ongoing pursuit of something I'm looking at now and come to know as social justice. So much of my personal and professional happiness comes from my service to others. If you're already doing justice work, thank you and keep doing it. Determine what you can do, if anything, to do more and to do better. But I want to sort of suggest to you that happiness, as Toni Morrison says in a commencement address quite like this one in 2011, that happiness is not enough. She said then, "The narrative of a worthy life is yours to write, graduates." I've often wished that Jefferson had not used that phrase, the pursuit of happiness, as the third right. Although I understand in the first draft was life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Of course, I, she writes, would have been one of those properties one had the right to pursue. So I suppose happiness is an ethical improvement over a life devoted to the acquisition of land, the acquisition of resources, the acquisition of slaves. Still, she writes, I would have preferred that he had written life, liberty, and the pursuit of meaningfulness or integrity or truth. While you savor the memories of this day and this moment, what comes after this reception, this day, and this personal milestone holds great promise again and challenges. With so much happening, know that so many people are depending on you, and you have a responsibility to move beyond your personal happiness. But here's what I want you to take away that has sort of resonated with me about this word happy. I was happy when I walked in and Kristen gave me a English bag. I was happy when Gavin came up and said, I took your class and I learned a lot. I want to box that up and hold it when I need it again, because there are going to be moments when I'm not happy. But Toni Morrison reminds me, and perhaps she can sort of add this to your repertoire, that I know that happiness has been real, if covert, the goal of your labors here. I know that it informs your choice of companions, the profession you will enter, but I urge you, please don't settle for happiness. It is not good enough. Of course you deserve it, but if that is all you have in mind, happiness, I want to suggest to you that personal success devoid of meaningfulness, free of a steady commitment to social justice, that's more than a barren life. It's a trivial one. It's looking good instead of being good. So if you're walking and speaking that truth that Morrison references that only you can define, perhaps you're not happy at all, just the opposite. Because once we start seeing it, we can't unsee it. You may already know that walking in your truth, a truth which you are committed to and with which you are at peace, can consciously or unconsciously threaten other folks. And just when you think things are going swimmingly, life's uncertainties will certainly interrupt and disrupt. Know also that your peace will sometimes attract those who want to steal that joy and that peace. But you know what? Let's go back to Queen Bee, who reminds us, or at least reminds me, that whatever that joy is, you can't let it do what? So what I take away from this and this whole sort of spectrum of happiness is that there are people out there who see your happiness and they're going to try to take it away. So you got to turn back to Queen Bee, and not just Queen Bee, but maybe some Audre Lorde, who reminds us that you got to take care of yourselves in order to find peace that goes beyond happiness. So Audre Lorde says, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Now, I didn't know this until I was preparing for this, thank you, Chris, that there is something out there in the world called a World Happiness Report. How many of you have heard of a World Happiness Report? Now, that is the strangest thing, but it tells us that here's what should make you happy. And it was started in probably, I want to say, July of 2011 by the United Nations. And what they did is it's like articles and rankings of national happiness based on respondent ratings in their own lives. It correlates with these factors and allegedly provides data to help guide public policy. Now take a look at these metrics here. These are the metrics for world happiness, business and economics. So just filter this through the lens of your own personal experience and see if you come up very happy on the scale. Citizen engagement, communications and technology, diversity, social issues, emotions, education and families, environment and energy, food and shelter, law and order, health, religion and ethics, transportation. And just so that you know, if you're thinking of vacation this summer, the happiest place on the planet for 6 years in a row happens to be Finland. So if you want to be happy, and I mean happy 24/7, Finland is a place we all need to go. Now, I'm not sure how happy that's going to make us all if we all go over there, or to make those who are there with us sort of coming in, given where we are about conversations on immigration, et cetera. By these standards, is there anybody who's really happy in a sustained and meaningful way? How exactly can happiness be sustained even if when we experience this? Since happiness is like sand rushing through the hourglass, perhaps pursuing something more substantive for ourselves, what Morrison called the integrity, the meaningfulness, and the truth, is more realistic and doable, even as we have to define these things over and over and over again. Now, once upon a time, there was an old professor, and that old professor was at a 2003 graduation reception. And he gave those graduates this two-part assignment. Number one, find causes that inspire and challenge you. Find individuals and communities that acknowledge, appreciate, and encourage your creativity, your kind of disruption. Find individuals and communities that will not allow you to take refuge in a world of cynicism and complacency and apathy. Number two, commit to challenging and disrupting the status quo. Both Dr. MLK and Angela Davis give us specifics on what that looks like and what that means. Diversity without structural transformation simply brings those who are previously excluded into a system of racist and misogynistic, or as racist and misogynistic as it was before. There can be no diversity and inclusion without transformation and justice. And here's the one that I want really you to pay attention to, especially in this moment politically. Large segments of society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice and humanity. Graduates, as my poet friend Jenna Swartz reminds us, this moment is not just about the past and the present, but it's also about the future. She says, our future is actually the next breath. It's not about tomorrow, it's not about next week, it's not about the party, it's not about the dinner, it's the next breath. So it's very fragile. But she gives me comfort and inspiration when she writes about this future that is already in love with us. She says, the future loves you already. The future is queer, the future is poetry, the future is every shade of brown. The future is indigenous, the future is reclamation, the future is accountable, the future is joyful, the future is honest, the future is ancient, the future is unimaginable. The future is breathing its first breath and crying its first cry. The future is a midwife. It's a birthing body, a moment of grief, a moment to grieve, a bowl of food, a shelter of belonging. The future strips the wallpaper and reveals the raw beauty of what never needed to be improved upon. The future is a forest grown from ash and an ocean free of trash. The future speaks truth to power until power is no longer a weapon, but a sacred tool to wield with care. The future throws its head back in laughter. The future takes up so much room we can't help but expand in her presence. The future eats fastest for breakfast. The future isn't waiting for you to be ready. The future loves you already. The future honks in the driveway. Get in, let's go. Finally, I've given you a postgraduate assignment, and what would a graduation talk be without some unsolicited advice? 2023 graduates, in pursuit of your, not necessarily your happily ever after, but in pursuit of your future happiness right now, in the here and now, try to do some good. Try to take care of yourselves and each other. And if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, then you really ought to show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Stomp your feet. Shout hooray! Hooray! Congratulations, cheers to you graduates, and Happy New Year! That was a lot of happy, wasn't it?
Thank you, Neal. Now we get to hear from one of our very own students, Ruth Beadle, who is the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences gold medalist from English. Ruth is graduating with a bachelor's in English with a concentration in creative writing and minors in mathematics, art history, and French. I was an accounting minor, so we've got something in common. While at ASU, she served as a teaching assistant, writing tutor, and member of the Women's Club water polo team. She also completed an undergraduate research project around depictions of grief in young adult literature, I'm assuming with you, Jim. And twice she earned the honorary mention citation from the competitive ASU Swarthout Awards in creative writing. No small task. So, Ruth, thank you for speaking with us.
All right. So I'm going to be honest. When I got the email that I was going to be talking about my own experience at ASU to you all for the next few minutes, I literally felt sick to my stomach. The reason why I write fiction is because it's so much easier to talk through that than talking about myself. So I am going to be talking about myself, spoiler. But I also promise you that this speech isn't just me saying, oh my gosh, I'm so humble and I hate talking about myself. And then I talk for 10 minutes about all of my accomplishments, and that makes you feel like you might as well nail your degree between 2 wooden boards and go at it with a chainsaw. So I decided to also talk with you about something important to me, which is my research on young adult bereavement. Fair warning, I am about to throw a bunch of statistics at you, but I also promised you that was done on purpose, and I know it's a lot, and I will explain a little bit why later. And I will also be mentioning COVID, so you can check that off your graduation speech bingo card now. So according to the World Health Organization, there have been around 6.8 million deaths from COVID as of April 11th of this year. Research has shown that the pandemic has created a grief pandemic, where for every death from COVID, around 2 children and 4 grandchildren are grieving. That leaves an astronomically large amount of young adults and children grieving than what is considered normal. Worse, the financially strenuous and prolonged illness aspect of COVID deaths are factors that leave young adults vulnerable to complicated grief. Complicated grief is defined by the American Psychological Association as a response to a death that manifests in chronic, prolonged, and/or intensified grief, as well as interrupted or stagnated mourning, delayed grief, and/or absent grief. The effects of these deaths in childhood are proven to remain in the future. Over 25% of 20-year-olds in the UK who commit suicide have experienced the death of someone close to them in childhood. It was also during COVID that I decided to return to being a grief support group leader for young adults. The kids I work with have many different ways that they process and completely different stories about their grief. And they also differ a lot in the factors that they face at home that affect the way that they're able to grieve, such as feeling valid for grieving culturally undervalued or disenfranchised losses, like pets or classmates, or a lot of them also have to help take care of siblings after the loss of a caregiver. In group, we talk about topics that are difficult and complex, like discussing the biggest regrets towards their deceased loved one, while also showing productive methods of coping with anger, like whacking balls with pool noodles. Even though group can feel serious, kids and young adults not only want spaces where they can be understood for their grief, but they also just want to be normal kids and teenagers. During free time, we play basketball, see who can race down slides the fastest, or play charades over Zoom. These kids have grief as a prominent part of their lives, but that's not all who they are or who I was when I was their age, like the statistics I listed earlier can sometimes suggest. When deciding on what I wanted to do for my thesis, I wanted to continue my work with young adults in grief. I decided to complete a psychological literature review on complicated grief in adolescents to see what the research says about what thought processes and actions are productive compared to unproductive coping mechanisms. I then decided to create a rubric to evaluate young adult literature based on the psychological studies. My rubric was then used to analyze the recently published National Book Award winner young adult novel All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir, to get a small understanding on how current fiction's depiction of complicated grief compares to the research. Finally, I also wrote my own short story to apply some of the research I did to fiction. It turns out that writing a thesis is a lot of work, especially during your senior year, during your final year, and yeah, it's a lot of work. I was taking extra classes for my minors in math, art, history, and French, which my family and friends can attest to was probably a bit too optimistic and a little bit too much. I was also working as a writing tutor and as a lifeguard, and I also competed as a member of the ASU Women's Club water polo team, where we finished 4th place at nationals last weekend, which I'm really excited and proud about. Yeah, I'm really proud of my teammates. So I also applied to graduate school for creative writing and subsequently got rejected from every school I applied to. But I also had a lot of help during this time. My mom and dad listened to my frustrations and grieved the rejections with me. My sister was there to call me an idiot when I needed to hear it and make me feel like everything was going to be okay. My grandparents kept me excited about my future. My friends and teammates listened to my stress about deadlines for my thesis, worries about what I was going to be doing with my future, and made me laugh with dumb TikTok jokes. For my thesis, I also thankfully had Dr. Blassingame as my director. He helped me understand how to complete a literature review and analysis on a project of this size, as well as keeping me sane over the past year, so I really want to say thank you. I also had Jenny Irish help me visualize how to make sure that my fiction story wasn't just statistics dressed as characters, and that my story actually breathed as living beings do. Through writing my thesis, I came to realize through how much literature and story helps young adults. While analyzing all my rage, I realized how literature specifically shows young adults the different pathways that their choices that they make can take them. And to have young adults experience what the narrators is experiencing in a safe space. While writing my fiction story, I was also able to understand and feel at least a little bit of what it would be like to live as one of the statistics that I stated in the beginning. While writing, I could see the young adults from group in the work I was doing, and in the statistics, I couldn't see them. Working with literature completely changed my understanding of my psychological research into seeing how it actually applies to real people. When thinking about what I wanted to do after graduation, connecting back to what Dr. Lester said, I thought about what made me feel the most content and what made me feel the most like I was giving the most, what I was thinking that had the most impact. Through understanding the impact that literature has on the students with my thesis, as well as my tutoring job and volunteering, I realized that I am most content with helping students grow. Nothing is really set in stone for my future yet, but I'm in the process of applying for a master's in English secondary education with certification here at ASU. I really hope to continue the research I completed here into my career as an educator. And for everyone graduating, I wish I could give you advice, but I find that most advice is not very helpful because most of the time it feels limiting, and I don't know, sometimes when people give me advice, I feel very ashamed of myself, especially with writing advice. So I can just give you what I have learned. What I have learned is that the path in front of you is not always clear, or even when it is clear, it's not very easy to choose. And being around people that support you and relying on other people is the best way to pursue what you want to do and to find that contentment and to find meaning in what you do. So I just want to say thank you again for being here today and for valuing English education, and then also thank you to Professor Lester for your speech and work. I also learned a lot in your class, and it was amazing, and thank you so much. And I also want to say thank you again to the Department of English for even selecting me for this award in the first place. And to all the graduates, I know some people in my cohort are here today for creative writing. Hi. I also really look forward to seeing what everyone in my cohort and everyone else, I'm looking forward to see what you guys all accomplish. And I'm really excited to see how each of you will uniquely use your English education to create spaces of understanding and healing for others. Yeah, thank you.
We couldn't have planned that better. Neal gives a call and and Ruth answers, so that was lovely. We are coming to an end of our ceremony, but we have one more speaker. Bob Sommer, who is the co-founder of Changing Hands Bookstore. He's had a tradition of offering gift certificates to graduating ASU students, so you can get more books, right? Anyway, COVID sort of put a dent in that for a while, but we're back to normal, or at least whatever the new normal is. So, Bob?
Good to be back. One page, double space, don't panic. The future is all shades of brown. The future is indigenous. The future is queer. The future is trans. The future is feminist. I graduated from ASU in '64. And then in '65 went off to grad school in Iowa. Now, I could leave it there and I'll let you think I went to the Iowa Writers Workshop. But actually, it was MUU, Iowa State University in Ames. There, I lived alone in the grad dorm and pined for the love interest from my ASU years, who was at the time an English major at San Francisco State. While browsing the campus bookstore there, I came across a display of Signet classics. Bought one by Austen or Tolstoy or Shakespeare, I don't remember quite where I started. And having read it, when I finished, I carefully removed the title page and wrote my amateur attempt at literary analysis on the back, mailed it off to she whom I hoped to impress. Eventually, over the next 6 months, I worked my way through Thomas Hardy, Chekhov, Dostoevsky, the Brontes, Dickens, Aristophanes, Sophocles, etc. I didn't make it till Middlemarch until many decades later, and since then I've read it twice. Although my relationship with the aforementioned young woman didn't last, I was, upon my return to the Valley after graduation, incredibly fortunate to have met yet another English major. We were married in '72, and in 1974, Gail and I started Changing Hands Bookstore with our friend Tom. From that tiny 474-foot bookstore to our current 2 stores totaling 18,000 square feet, we've always had a classics section. And for me, that was my happy place. Recently, however, some of our staff began lobbying to dismantle our classics section and integrate the books with our general fiction. Can you guess why? Seriously, can you guess why? Diversity? Yes. I mean, we have token diversity in our classics section. I think the entire gay population is represented by Oscar Wilde. And if people of color want to find themselves in books, they can be Jim from Huckleberry Finn, or indigenous can find Magua the Huron from Last of the Mohicans. That's about it. The other issue was, what is a classic? Have to be written by somebody who's dead? The moment Toni Morrison dies, do we put The Bluest Eye in the classic section and all our other books or not? These were tough calls. We didn't even know where to put The Great Gatsby. So, compromise. We'll have a display case, say for Penguin Classics, somewhere in the store. And the rest of the current classic section will be mixed in with the literary fiction. That will work for me because, first of all, it's the right thing to do. It's what my staff is asking for. It's considerate of those members of the community that do not feel represented or included by our current classics section. And it provides a place to browse a limited section of pretty damn good literature that doesn't claim to be exhaustive. And most important, I will still have a happy place to hang out. Thank you. I've given Krista the stack of gifts. She's holding them up there. If you're a graduate, stop by and get one. If you're faculty or staff, speakers up here today, stop by and get one. And after all those people get one, if you want one, it's yours.
Thank you, Bob. Well, that concludes our program. I want to thank you all for coming. I hope you'll stick around, have a little food, a little conversation. And Kristen, is waving the gift certificates. So please don't hesitate to pick one up. Congratulations, graduates. That's why we're all here.